Each of us carries stress and anxiety with us as a constant partner in our life. This is normal, and in many ways it's probably right and good. There is a lot to fear in our world and in ourselves, and much of it's very real and very possible. And most of us are quite adept at imagining the bad stuff that might be lurking just around the corner or be waiting for us come tomorrow. Much that we face in life is potentially threatening, and holding concerns is rational. What things in your life bring you face to face? What things in your life bring you face to face with an expectation of likely pain or suffering? It could be your health, your vocation, your relation to loved ones, your sense of status or your sense of worth, or one of many other things. Could be snakes. Our fears are as small as not wanting to stub our toe, and as large as the future of our species and our planet. Awareness of the things that threaten our well-being is an important asset to help us negotiate the path through life, because it helps us anticipate and avoid the pitfalls and unfortunate situations that we might find to be harmful. But on the other hand, if we allow those things we're afraid of to consume us or overwhelm our thinking, we face a problem of crippling our life chances by becoming hyper-attentive to these anxieties. Clearly, there's got to be a balance somewhere between judicious caution and rampant paranoia. As we might have said earlier this morning, a sweet spot. And we should like to develop sufficient skills and self-knowledge to help us find this just right level of anxiety and fear. And while many of our fears are rooted in parts of our life that are individualized and personal, some are based on concerns and threats that we all share, that we hold in common. How many of you feel some stress or anxiety about the coming election? And if not, why not? No, I hear constantly from you that we are deeply afraid that our nation might once again revert to a path of reactivity and negativism, to an order that seeks drastic solutions to protect us from fabricated and imaginary problems. Not that the nation doesn't have problems we need to address, but none of them really need to be solved by authoritarian means, by isolationism, or by self-protection based on the blaming and othering of outsiders. If you're like me, you sort of just hope that the election would be over, like tomorrow, and that it was now November 6th, and that we know the results, that they are what we hoped for and prayed for since this whole election business started a year or two ago. Sometimes the things we find unnerving are far less important, and we can chide ourselves for the angst and concern we allow them to bring into our lives. Our minds can be little worry machines as we always face a future that is largely unknown. But in the case of this election, our anxiety is justified, and there are real possibilities to fear. The election might not produce the result we hope for, or it might result in a contested outcome, leading to who knows what legal proceedings and manipulations and shenanigans. And even if the elections tend to go favorably, it's likely that many of the smaller elections won't, and that there still will be issues and major divides we have to face. One of the biggest reasons for our current anxiety is that there is a very real division in political belief and attachment, and two diametrically opposed factions that have developed contempt and enmity across party lines. Right now, bipartisanship, cooperation, figuring things out together is not an option. So everything about this election feels like we're engaged in what the economists call a zero-sum game. There are only winners or losers, and winners will win big and losers will lose big. I don't need to tell you that this is a stress we share, although I just did, and that we can only do so much to influence the election outcome. The feelings we have about what is most likely to happen have changed with the course of events. Some weeks it's looked really scary. Other weeks it's looked better or looked bad. All depends on your point of view. But whatever we predict, two things remain true. We don't know what will actually happen, and we care very much about what does. Among people I know, some are managing this security and insecurity in ways that appear to be fairly successful, while others are bothered enough that it tends to dominate their days and brings them major distress. I could bring advice in many ways, but none of my advice will change the results of the election. If you care, you can lend some time, treasure, and wisdom to try to influence the outcome. And if many people do this, it might have an impact. I know that there are groups of people from this congregation that are working together with things like postcard mailing campaigns and things to do just that. And while taking direct action provides an outlet, it doesn't solve the fundamental problem of coping with stress. So instead, I will talk a little about how we can think about and deal with strong negative emotions, such as fear or greed or any kind of obsession. And to do this, we can start by separating out what is objective and subjective about our feelings and fears. And while something like the election seems to be a clear and external reality that can easily be seen and interpreted as precarious, the emotions you hold about it are really far more personal, and they are rooted in you, your personality, your experience, your basis in experience. And I'm not a psychologist, surprise, surprise, but it seems likely that any threat is more likely to become magnified in someone who has experienced more pain and more harm previously in their lives. I think if we've been burned many times, we tend to have less trust that things will go well. If we have seen our fears become reality, we're probably more likely to anticipate similar outcomes in the future. So maybe the first place to turn is into ourselves and honestly ask ourselves, what really hurts here? Or where and how do I feel discomfort? And am I just sort of humoring myself with, oh, the pain, or is it something that's really messing me up? We're not looking for a checklist of what can go wrong, but we are asking, how do I see myself invested in the outcome? Any situation where we feel deep anxiety and fear, and where these interfere with our ability to live fully, comes as much from within as from outside. And anxiety becomes truly debilitating if it starts to feed other negative responses, like externalizing it as anger or internalizing it as shame and grief. And fear, anger, grief, and shame can all feed on one another, creating this huge vortex of negativity that feels overwhelming and just impossible to deal with. I imagine most of us, for some set of reasons, have been places in life where we do indeed feel truly overwhelmed. So how do we deal with deep anxiety or with addictive behaviors or any other self-reinforcing badness in our lives? And the best answers I can propose are, in theory, fairly simple. As I started to say already, the first step is to clearly see and work to understand what it is that really bothers you and how it incapacitates you. And it sort of depends on how bad things are. In the lexicon of 12-step programs that deal with addictions, hitting the bottom is often considered the turning point when the possibility of recovery starts. And again, using AA as a guide, we can turn to the Serenity Prayer that I said earlier. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Self-evaluation and analysis is essential to coping with difficulty. It's part of learning to accept those things I cannot change. This asks for deep mindfulness, seeing oneself clearly. And there really is a huge overlay here between sort of the Buddha kind of approach to thinking and mindfulness and whatever, and self-analysis in dealing with issues. Carl Rogers, the psychologist, considered what he called a curious paradox, that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. And I'll say that again. When I accept myself just as I am, only then can I change. Personal wakefulness entails seeing and accepting everything that we are, our whole selves, our good aspects, our passions and desires, our most painful experiences, everything. When we examine ourselves without judgment, otherwise being as objective as possible, and just seeing these things rather than feeling shame or a thrill or whatever at them, we can gradually chase away the feelings of unworthiness or shame that are often linked to other problematic aspects of our personality. Only when we see the prison we have created for ourselves can we learn that indeed there is a potential way out. So, as a truism, step one is know thyself. Because while we can't usually change whatever threats are making us anxious, we can come to see why our anxiety is debilitating for us. And step two is probably just as obvious, and it's as simple to say and as hard to do. It is to work to awaken our compassion and our connections, to open our hearts in the face of our fear. And opening compassion, awakening compassion, has at least two faces. First is outward. Seek to find compassion for those who are bringing you distress, who you held in contempt or wanted to hold in contempt. And in the case of election, for example, we might have felt deep fear and loathing of the white nationalists that stormed the Capitol on January 4th. And we are worried that they might still be ascendant in control of our nation. But a compassionate response is to recognize that their attitudes and behaviors also result from deep conflicts and pain in their own understanding of how the world works and how they fit in it. And it might even be worthy to seek a connection with some of these people, to make some of the differences more human. That's one of the values of compassion and outreach and connection and sharing. At the same time, while we try to become compassionate for others, it's even more important to develop compassion for ourselves and to appreciate and accept how we came to be who we are. We will have deep trouble working through any issues unless we see and accept ourselves. I believe that each of us is built out of fundamental goodness, and it's natural and right to want to be cooperative and supportive of other persons. I know this is a little Panglossian, and I'm being a little Pollyanna-ish, but I do believe that. I believe in the fundamental essence of goodness, human goodness. Deviations from essential goodness are manifestations and problems and pain, and are innately painful. Our goodness is our innate Buddha nature, and we should work to repair and restore it in ourselves, and if possible, in others. Now, Tara Brach, a psychologist and writer who first related the story of the white tiger that I told, and I'll probably hear about this in the Time for All Ages, let's all leave them with happiness and a moment of hope. She wrote, "Perhaps the biggest tragedy in our lives is that freedom is possible, yet we can pass our years trapped in the same old patterns as did the tiger. Entangled in a trance of unworthiness and concern, we can grow accustomed to caging ourselves with self-judgment and anxiety, with restlessness and dissatisfaction. Like Mohini, the tiger, we grow incapable of accessing the peace and freedom that are our birthright. However, unlike Mohini, we have the capacity to learn to recognize when we are keeping ourselves trapped by our own beliefs and fears. And of course, we can get help in recognizing this as well from friends and others that love us and give us positive feedback, whether we think we deserve it or not. We can learn to see that we are wasting precious life, and we can try to adjust. Fear is really nothing but the anticipation of future pain, and it's also often rooted in previous experiences of pain. But it's not useful to try to ignore it, to resist it, or to push it away. Indeed, we need to see our fears as an opportunity, as a doorway for our own awakening, and a way to find a way to build a safe harbor for ourselves so we can get along with a good life. So let us all get woke. Let's come to know ourselves, to accept what we find, and to change what we can as we can, to change what we will as we will. Amen, and blessed be. And now, we will all please rise.